We got Jeff Slabatsky here with
Hi, I'm Rick Turoczy.
Rick. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you, Jeff?
Good, doing good. Good to
Good.
see you.
It's good to see you
Fun
too.
to fun to connect. I know I feel like I'm seeing you more being stuck up in the house than I have like out of the house. So it's fun. But yeah, hey Rick, I appreciate you making time. And
Sure, of course.
you've been a guy I've always just counted a good friend and peer and comrade in this entrepreneurial ecosystem journey. So for those that haven't had the opportunity to kind of dig into some of your work, can you give a little backstory and kind of who Rick is and what you're working on?
Sure, absolutely. So I'm in Portland, Oregon, out on the West Coast, and kind of sandwiched between Seattle and San Francisco. And I moved here in about 95 and kind of fell in doing startup work. Wound up working at a variety of companies here. Back then it was installed software, so like on floppy disks and that kind of stuff. And then eventually became the web and that kind of work, and did that work for about 12 years or so. And that's when I really started to spend some time with the open source community here in Portland, which was really strong at the time. And I discovered there was a lot more startup activity than anybody was talking about. And I wasn't talented enough as a developer. I was a hobbyist developer, but I wasn't talented enough to contribute to any of the projects. So what I decided to do was kind of open source my marketing communications. So I just started writing about what I was seeing. That was about 2007. And I just started a blog called Silicon Florist and started writing about what I was seeing. And, I'd been blogging since the late 90s, and no one had ever really read my blog before, so I didn't expect it to be any different. But for whatever reason, at that point in time, it struck a chord, took off. Silicon Prairie News was starting up around then too, and a variety of other blogs or publications that were trying to do that work. And so that's, I think, when we first started talking, was when we were kind of working on those fronts. And then that for me translated into another form of startup support. I got the chance to start an early stage startup accelerator in Portland, and we've been running that for more than 10 years now. So just very mentorship driven, kind of somewhere a mix of both, for people who are familiar with the industry, a mix of kind of the Techstars model and the Y Combinator model kind of munged together to help startups here in Portland and throughout Oregon.
Nice. Yeah, I think it was. Gosh, it was. I feel we were down at South by Southwest as well, bumped into each other, and kind of I knew the work you were doing, and and I just love your energy, your spirit, and just kind of selflessness for the community. And so I'm like, this Rick guy, he's onto something in Portland. So yeah, it was fun to get better acquainted with what you're doing too, for sure.
Yeah.
One of the questions I want to throw out to you as well, just in light of kind of everything going on, share your thoughts specifically to Portland, what you're seeing in your own backyard, but what you think kind of what this could mean for some of the cities like Portland, Omaha, Indianapolis, right? Some of these second tier cities that are in between the coast. What's your take on that current situation, I guess, if you will?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think for folks who haven't been out to Portland, there are a lot of similarities between Omaha and Portland. A lot of, kind of revitalization of older kind of warehouse districts, and, a really kind of vibrant startup community that probably doesn't get the attention it deserves, even though some people are doing some pretty amazing things. And so my focus is primarily in technology, but we also do an accelerator for consumer products folks. So traditional kind of like food and beverage and apparel and those kind of things. And again, to provide more context for folks, my co-founder in that project kind of classifies Oregon as the Silicon Valley of consumer products, because we have Nike headquartered here, North American headquarters of Adidas is here, Columbia is headquartered here, but then we also have, massive like craft brewing operations and other beverage operations and food and beauty and all that kind of stuff. So
Sure.
that part of the market is being far more challenged by what's going on right now. And then kind of the other dynamic that Omaha and Portland share is that kind of, local coffee shop, kind of one-off food cart, that kind of thing. And that's part of the Portland culture, is those almost recreating the wheel with a slight permutation, but everybody has their own thing that they really like. And there are 12 different types of donuts in town, but everybody has their particular favorite. And that's hurting right now for sure. And I'm wondering how the culture is going to recover there. But I think from a technology standpoint, from a startup standpoint, Portland, because of our proximity to both Seattle, San Francisco, we've always been a remote town. So we have a lot of remote first workers here who, and now we're all remote workers for the time being. And so we're set up to deal with that kind of stuff. So that is having less of an impact. But I think the last time we went through this was when we started Pi, and that was the mortgage crisis. Right. And we saw a lot of startup activity coming out of the downturn. And I expect we'll see that same kind of activity, whether it be because folks are unfortunately losing their jobs, or because folks just see this as a good time to take that risk. I'm hoping we see a lot more of that activity. And then I'm also hopeful that in these second tier cities, we kind of see this renaissance of not only kind of venture capital investment, but also kind of accelerator incubator activity. I think could be a good time to kind of reboot and reinvent that model for folks, and really think about how to build programs that are in line with the culture of where people are, rather than just trying to copy something that they've seen elsewhere.
That's good. That's really good. Yeah. And we were joking, I think, in one of our earlier conversations, like, it's funny that this conversation takes 10 to 15 years, right, to really sink in, right? But what you're saying, I feel spirit of it from when you and I were starting Silicon Prairie News and Silicon Florist, right?
Yeah.
It was kind of like, how do you know that great activity is happening in Omaha, in Portland, in other cities? But, again, how do you convene and connect and, just basically get awareness of those communities?
Right.
And so now having that wisdom, if you will, and expertise and rolling up your sleeves for a decade plus, right? It's like, okay, what can this look like with that kind of that reboot that we could have in front of us? So, yeah.
Well, and I think it's always, time and time again, and you've experienced it. And I mean, it was a slightly different path for Omaha. I think it was Silicon Prairie News, and then Big Omaha was like the thing that really catalyzed. And congratulations to you on that project. I've always been super impressed by that.
Thanks.
It's really, the community's there. Your community is there. It's just not self-aware. So you need to figure out ways to kind of reinforce that the community exists and continue to tell that community the stories of its existence, so that people have a kind of hub of activity or a campfire to gather around to hear those stories. And I think that's one of the components that often seems to be missing in these situations, is that storytelling component, or that kind of amplification. And so people kind of jump ahead and they're like, well, we should start an accelerator or an incubator, and then people will gather around that. And that's a little bit backwards. You kind of have to make sure the community is there before you can create something that the community can then support one another with. So I'm always looking for, kind of new publications that are focused on the community, or new podcasts, or whatever form of media people choose, but just a way that helps the community understand its own existence and who's there. So I think we'll see a lot, especially with people, accessibility to publishing platforms these days is far more prevalent than it was when we were starting, right? I mean, we had to figure out our own WordPress install and keep all the things up to date and all the plugins and all that stuff. And now you've got things like, podcast platforms that are pretty much push button, if not like on your iPhone kind of thing, or, really robust blogging platforms or YouTube or whatever. So I'm really excited to see that kind of next generation of media come out of this period when a lot of folks are not only taking the opportunity to experiment, but as you and I have both talked about, like the bar for production value is way, way low right now.
Right.
So, I mean, this is a really good time to experiment because nobody's expecting anything like highly produced in terms of content.
Yeah, that's good. Hopefully that serves as an encouragement as well to somebody that can hear this or see this, right? That's like, I don't know, wherever it is in Ohio or North Dakota, right? And there's some great things happening in both those states, by the way, already that I can think of names. But, you're right. It goes back to that comment you made about reset, right? You don't have to have the latest Fuji camera and video, gear and all that. It's like, man, just start telling the stories and build and connect. And what better time to do it? Like you said, when the bar's been reset, lower. But
for sure.
That's good. Hey, Rick, where do you kind of question I've always been curious about, like who or what inspires you? Like, where are you getting your inspiration from? This can be authors, books, music, like kind of first thing that comes to mind. Again, that could be different during this time versus a couple months ago. But yeah. I
mean, I get a lot of inspiration from, I was an English major in school. And so like I do a lot of like reading or like audiobook kind of things just for inspiration or reinforcement. And pretty much, the newest thing that comes out, I've got like Arlen Hamilton's book over here that I got to get to, and I'm in the middle of Uncanny Valley. Stuff like that. I think I'm always inspired by some of my motivation comes from my lived experience. And that was, the part I didn't talk about is after those 12 years of working in startups, I had fooled myself into thinking that perhaps I was a startup founder and I should start my own company. And it took me a few years to figure out that wasn't really my personality type. I was always better helping founders. And so a lot of my motivation comes from how do you make that process easier on people who have the potential to be really compelling founders, but also how do you educate people on the reality of what it is to be a founder rather than them being mired in this kind of mythology of what it means to be a founder? And how do you help them come to the conclusion more quickly about whether they're a founder or not? There's no right answer. Like if you're a founder, great, happy to help you there. But if we figure out that you're not really a founder and that's not what motivates you, then let's get you on a path that's more motivating more rapidly. And so it's always kind of trying to figure out like, how can we, Pi as an organization, be more helpful to the community and more accessible so that more people have the support they need to do really interesting and amazing things, and seeing founders blossom when they have that kind of support, be it either just like mentorship, but also just kind of the emotional and mental support for folks who are going down that very hard path. Those remain really motivating for me day to day as well.
That's good. That's really good. That and you talk. I feel like there was conversation around kind of mental health and stamina and finding your focus right before pre-COVID. But now again with this opportunity to kind of sit and reflect on what really that means for individuals, right? Again, I think maybe an opportunity for us to come out of this stronger, right? To say, working 90 hours a week isn't necessarily definition of success, and B, it's not sustainable, like to my, human needs and what I'm trying to produce. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I think our respective community cultures have, at least in my opinion and experience, been more balanced traditionally. Like I see people in Omaha and people in Portland working really hard, but only for a certain amount of the day because they have family they want to spend time with, or they have hobbies that keep them kind of more well-rounded. Whereas in some other communities, and this isn't a judgment, it's just a
Sure.
cultural aspect. Like some other communities, like work is everything. Like that's where your
Right.
friends are, that's where your social circle is, that's where all your activity kind of focuses around that. And I think communities that have that kind of cultural dynamic are probably a little harder hit than some of our more kind of well-rounded or a better balanced kind of communities that might be a little more resilient to make it through this point in time.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's really good. What are some things that you've got coming down the pipe over the next month or so? I know you're continually have webinars and just different great conversation, great content that you guys are churning out. So
Thank you.
kind of some of the things that you guys are working on now.
Yeah. So when this whole thing hit, it took me, a few weeks for this to dawn on me, but a lot of my day-to-day is sitting down with people and having 20-minute, half-hour meetings with them over coffee to help them figure out what they're doing or where the resources they need are, or that kind of thing. And so given that we couldn't do that, and I'm introverted, but sitting in Zoom calls is far more taxing than sitting over a cup of coffee with somebody.
Absolutely.
And so I couldn't do that work the way I wanted to do it. So we kind of transitioned into, let's use that time frame as kind of content creation. So we've been working on a lot of stuff like this, our podcast, that kind of thing, general written stuff. So really amping up our content creation. And then from a strategic standpoint, we're kind of taking a worst case scenario, like either this current existence is going to last a lot longer than any of us think it's going to, or it's going to be reduced. We're all going to go back to work, and then there's going to be a second wave, or somewhere in the not too distant future we'll experience this again. And so from a Pi perspective, we are trying to figure out how can we perform effectively as a virtual offering when our entire existence has been based on a bunch of founders sitting in the same room with one another, and the serendipity that occurs from those random collisions or people popping by or that kind of thing. And so a lot of our thinking lately is, let's assume that the program's going to be virtual for the next cohort, and how do we recreate some of that magic in a virtual environment? Like, is that even possible? And so that's been a good kind of academic, intellectual exercise. I'm not sure we can do as good a job as a virtual program, but we're going to try and see how that works.
Awesome. Good on you. And let me know too, how I or we, the community, can support you guys. Because I mean this, Rick, you're top of the list for guys I admire, and really been encouraging to me, knowing that, not alone in this battle, journey, fun, whatever this is that we're on right now. So just now and over the months ahead. So
that's very kind of you, Jeff. Thanks. Yeah. And for folks who haven't got to spend time with me or aren't familiar with our work, rest assured, we have no idea what we're doing. And everything is just a huge experiment for us, and we're always fully willing to admit that. So we have far more to learn from everyone else. So if other people out there listening are interested in collaborating or need feedback or whatever, we're here to help as well.
Awesome. That's great. Really good. Say, Rick, where can folks find out more about Pi and your work? And I'll obviously link this up in the notes as well. But,
thank you. Yeah, sure. So we refer to Portland. Our shorthand for Portland is our airport code. So PDX, kind of like you have the OMA stuff going too.
Right.
So it's Pi, PIE, like the food, PDX.com is our main site. It's pretty nebulous because we change the project so often that we don't want to put anything in writing, but that's a good place to find us. And we're Pi PDX on pretty much all the socials as well. And then I'm usually Turoczy on most of the socials because it's so easy to spell. That's Turo, C as in Charlie, Z as in zebra, Y. Probably spend most of my time on Twitter. And that tends to be a pretty vibrant community for us here in Portland, and a pretty accessible way to get in touch with people in Portland. So that's probably the best place to find me.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Rick, thank you again for your time.
Of course.
Always good to see you. Yeah. And I appreciate just everything you're doing and your support of our community over the years. And
thank you.
We'll surely keep in touch as things progress down the line. So
that sounds good. Thanks, Jeff.